Hey guys, Henning and Morten from FlippedNormals here, and in today's video we are going to be taking you through sort of like the steps for creating a character artist portfolio. But before we get into that, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below and turn on notifications so you get notified every time we put out a new video. So, to start off with, a character artist portfolio. Like, we've done a video like this in the past where we talked about how to create a killer portfolio, sort of making everything that goes in and all the prep and where you present it, how you present it, all of that. But this is going to be more of a plan to how to actually create the thing. So make sure you stick around until the end where we sort of like give you more of a step-by-step guide and exactly what you need to put into your character art portfolio in order to make a good one.
Yeah, this is probably the most requested topic we've had recently.
Yeah.
And we used to work as character artists, and that's why we keep talking about character art all the time. So hopefully we have some insight here which can help you. Now, there are many ways you can actually start with this. One of the ways you should probably start to structure your portfolio is by, we had a whole video on this, but in short, don't do your own original concept art. It's going to be massively beneficial if you base your character art on existing concept art. This, of course, is different if you're going as a concept sculptor or someone, then clearly
or
you
a
need,
concept artist.
Or a concept artist, then you clearly need that. But you're going to be able to make your art's gonna be so much better if you actually base it on concept art.
Yeah, and I think we saw some, I wouldn't call it backlash, but it's like there are a lot of opposite views from ours in that video, talking about like you should definitely do your own concepts and like you're not encouraging people to, follow their path and follow their passion. But it's not about that. It's not about like if you want to do character art and you want to do concepts for it, then there's a special position for that, but it's very, very limited. Whereas as a character artist in general, where you get an existing concept in a VFX production or for a game or something, and then you create that in 3D, for example. So it is slightly different there. Like, I definitely think that people should, try to create their own concepts if that's what they want to pursue. But for most people, it's not worth the time.
Your portfolio is just going to be a lot stronger without it. Like, it's going to be significantly better when you have that. We've seen so many times where you have a person who's technically fine, their skills is adequate, but their work looks really good because of an incredibly strong concept, and they're just kind of replicating that. And then you have, on the other side, you have people they're really good technically, they have amazing skills, but their art just isn't that interesting because they used their own original concepts, which in their case just wasn't their strong suit.
Yeah, so even if you're like technically gifted and you can execute really well, whether it be 3D or 2D, like you paint something or you create a character, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be good at coming up with concepts. So it's more about taking that part of the equation or that thing out of the equation so you can, I guess, focus more on creating that. Otherwise, you first have to become a skilled concept artist and then a character artist. So it's kind of like...
Yeah, and 3 years later, you're ready to create your portfolio.
So what do you want to spend your time on? So that's why we sort of advocate for not creating your own concepts.
The next one is that we really recommend that you tailor your portfolio to whatever it is you want to work with. If you want to go and do really stylized Riot style characters or something like Blizzard, you should definitely build a portfolio which shows that you can do that you can pull off the Blizzard style like that, and you can just be put into a production right away. Or if you're going for more realism, if you want to do The Last of Us or you want to do VFX, you just have to focus more on realism. This is so important because it doesn't matter if your skill sets are amazing if they don't need that skill.
Yeah, but it's simply like applying to a studio. You kind of have to do your research and figure out what is it that you want to do there. It's both research for what do you personally want to do and what does the studio want to do. Like, if you love realism and you just like monsters and fantasy nights, but like in a super realistic setting, then maybe it doesn't make sense for you to apply at Pixar because they don't do that. It's like maybe you have this, the skills to tailor your style to that, but then you have to sort of tailor the portfolio to contain pieces that they can, we can fit someone like that into our pipeline.
Yeah, I would also say that I wouldn't recommend necessarily tailoring it specifically to a studio, but more like the art style someone is doing. If you want to go into Pixar and you have the perfect portfolio for Pixar, then they'd probably not hiring at the moment. That's really risky. But if you're doing generally stylized characters and you're really good at creating that, now suddenly you can just fit into any studio, and then you can just modify your style a little, and then you fit into DreamWorks, Pixar, Riot, whatever it is. At least you're in the same ballpark of it.
Yeah, we were talking about that just before the video. A friend of ours, and he did a concept art tutorial for us, and he was working on Klaus, the film that just came out, and like his style was sort of like, it just sort of like fit really well with Klaus, and he was a perfect choice for doing like background paintings and that kind of stuff, which I think is what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. He's just been doing environment art.
So that was like a case of, I actually don't know how much of it was like he fitted his specific work to Klaus to apply for the sort of portfolio position and stuff, but it was definitely like you could see that, okay, we can take someone like with his style and implement it into our company.
Could also be because he's really handsome.
It
could be both.
50-50. Now, another important one, which is like, you see this a lot, is student work being used in portfolios or in reels. And it's something that we, for many years, has like told people not to do. The reason for it is like, you're already compromising on things you want to do, and you're compromising on the quality. It's never going to be as good unless you're at a specific school that does, let's say you're at the Vancouver Film School, for example. Okay, you make one piece, and this is your portfolio piece. Sure, then use your student work in your portfolio. But the reality is most 3D schools, you have these short courses, or it's maybe like 3 months long, maybe it's 4, 5, 6 months long, but you work as part of a team, you come up with something together, and maybe it's not exactly what you want to do, and it's never going to be as good because you're working under a deadline, and there's a bunch of other stuff, and then you have papers you have to write, so you have to compromise on a lot of things. So putting student work in a reel or in a portfolio is generally something that we advise against.
Even if you're doing your own original work for it, a lot of times it's being composed in the same environments at the end, and now the studio is like, cool, it's a student work. One of the reasons as well is that sometimes you don't really know how much of the work is the student's work and how much is the teacher's work. When I've been teaching now, creature modeling, like what we did last year at the animation workshop, there are times where you've been literally sculpting half the character. And that is essentially the person who's hiring is now going to the school to pimp up the characters. Like I was responsible looking through some reels at DNEG, and then I went to the animation workshop to review basically people who would apply for that. And I just know how much I was doing for some of these students. So it also works for that. Be very careful with including actual school projects.
Another thing that sort of ties into that, back to the DNEG stuff, is, I think we talked about it before, is the sort of like the school assignments the students get. Oftentimes what you'll see is 30 students get the same assignment, and 30 students put the same assignment into their portfolio or into their reel, and that shows up at the company, and they go like, well, you all worked on this, and it's like, it doesn't show anything new. Okay, we'll just scrap that. It like, because you also have to set yourself apart somehow. It can't just be part of just another piece. So, and that's what Heng was alluding to there, like, you don't know how much the teacher has actually helped with these assignments that are like predefined. You don't know what they were given. Maybe they had a lot of help material to begin with, so it's like, that's again one of the reasons why we sort of like encourage students to make work outside of school and put that in your portfolio.
Yeah, like imagine you have an assignment in school, and that is to make a photorealistic bear. That by itself would be amazing. If you have photorealistic bear portfolio, fantastic. But what if the students were given a photo scan of the bear? And they were given like skeletons and everything there as 3D models, and basically what they have to do is they just have to interpret it, and the model has already been done 30 more times, so they have a clear definition what the success looks like for them. So now they can just kind of replicate what they're seeing, and now you're going to have some people in class ending up with an amazing bear, and the worst person class adding up with a perfectly good bear. So in this case, you just can't use it.
And then something else, which is so specifically for 3D, if you want to work in film or commercials or something like that, if you're doing characters, it doesn't really matter if it's for characters or props, it's for anything. Make sure to include your wireframes. It's just It's just one of the, like, we need to see wireframes. We need to see how has this actually been modeled. Does it make sense? Are your loops where they're supposed to be? Does it show you have like good control over your polys there? And then for a 2D portfolio, it might make sense to include more angles of your character, so it's not just like 1 3/4 view, but maybe it's like 1 3/4 view and then maybe something from the back as well, just to show that you understand how everything sort of like works in space, in 3D space, but in 2D. That's also pretty important.
I would also say that when it comes to making a portfolio, you really shouldn't start too early with this. And the reason is because by the time you're done with your first piece, it's already obsolete because the foundation was so rushed for it. So instead of going through a few pieces and having an insane learning experience from that, you should already be at a decent level when you start the piece, because otherwise they're not going to work in your portfolio. Like, make sure that if you're doing animal anatomy, that is not your first animal study ever.
Yeah.
You've done a few studies, and now it's time to actually do the real piece for it. It's just gonna improve your reel like significantly.
Yeah, and this might take months. Just like your first anatomy study of an animal is probably not going to be great. It's going to take a few tries. It might take a few months. That's also sort of leads us on to a point, which is like this shouldn't be rushed. Like, you have to think about like what you're applying for and who you're applying against, like who you're competing against, who's your competition. Is something we've talked about in the past as well. Just because you have a good portfolio and you think it's great and your mom is like, okay, let's put it on the fridge, that doesn't mean anything.
No.
Like, for the companies that are looking to hire, they just want to get the best people. And it doesn't really matter. Like, okay, here's another guy who was better than you, then he's probably going to get hired. That's just a harsh reality of this. Like, it's a very competitive industry. And there's a lot of people getting into it, so you just have to stand out somehow. And by not rushing, by ensuring that you're up to scratch before you start your portfolio, you don't rush it, that's sort of like, I think already kind of gives you an edge, because you see that a lot where people, they just put in their first thing, or they put in the student work. They don't really plan it. They don't think too far ahead. They're just like, okay, I just need a bunch of pieces in here and it's going to be great.
And also don't rush, or don't waste your time on creating a custom website. Don't worry about making a fancy site, paying people money for it, buying domains, renewal, all that kind of stuff. Make an ArtStation portfolio, put it up there. It's 100% okay. Put your reel on YouTube or Vimeo and just link to it.
Yeah.
This is 100% fine. It's actually a lot of times better than doing a custom site, because if you're a recruiter or art director, whatever it is, you know how ArtStation works. You can browse it, you know where the contact info is, everything is easy. But with custom websites, oh my god, that's all over the place. You have no idea where to find their email. Maybe you can't even look at their work because it's like using some bullshit like Wix, and you can't actually click the images, download them. It's just very problematic. Stick to ArtStation, keep it really simple, and just make it your life easier.
It's the same thing with like, don't do your own concept. It's like, it takes years to become a good web designer.
Yeah.
And just because you know how to do characters, that doesn't mean you know how to do or create an intuitive and easy to browse website. So ArtStation's already sorted that out for you. You don't even need ArtStation Pro or anything. Just put it up there. Give the recruiter your link, and then they can just, browse through it. It's pretty intuitive.
Yeah, you're already at a disadvantage, and now the person who's competing against you spends 2 months making a new showreel piece, and you're spending out smashing CSS against your keyboard and just hoping everything works, and it doesn't.
Yeah. No, it's about using your time most efficiently. And like, if you want to be a character artist, then you should focus your time, creating character art. It's really as simple as that.
Also make deadlines for your project. Whenever you figure out what kind of stuff you want in your portfolio, which we'll get to in a minute, then just make deadlines for you. Not because you're running out of time and now you have to just deliver at whatever point you're at, but just so you have an approximate idea of where it is. You always work more and more effectively the closer you get to a deadline. In the beginning, you're relaxing and all that. So you just need to know it's due at this date, and this is specifically what I want to deliver for it. If you're not doing a reel, you're just doing screenshots or renders, then you're going to have this amount of renders at this time.
Yeah.
And then I also recommend that you do like work in progress images along the way, which you maybe put up, get feedback on that and all that. It kind of gives you like a work in progress reel or portfolio, so that you're not just go from a day where you have nothing to a day where you have everything. You kind of get to test it out and get feedback on what works in terms of layout and presentation of images and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think deadlines really shouldn't be underestimated. I mean, I know I was bashing it like just a couple of minutes ago in terms of working as a team, but again, there's a lot of compromises there. But it's more like, just because let's say you do a 2-month deadline, you're working on this full time. You're like, I want to do a character and I want to start to finish 2 months. Okay, cool. Then you know that on the 31st of May or whatever, that's when you really should be finished. And then what you can do is you can sort of segment it. It doesn't have to be crazy. You don't have to have like a Gantt chart where everything is like tracked, but it's to give yourself milestones along the way where you go like, okay, I should probably spend a week or 2 weeks getting the character up to scratch. Like, okay, here's the proportions and everything. I figured out the costume. Maybe I spend a week on retopology, 3 days on UVs, and then sort of just start to plan it out so you can see which milestones you can hit. That also gives you an idea for when you then go into a production, how fast am I? Like, what can I expect? You know, if someone comes up to you and is like, can you do the retopology for this entire character in like 2 days? You're like, well, when I tried it by myself, it took me like 7 to 10 days. And then you can, okay, maybe I'll need twice as long. So it's a good way for you to sort of like gauge the speed at which you work as well.
Yeah, and if you are thinking now that I have no idea how fast I am, then you need to just do more practice and practice it out. You shouldn't do this as your first final piece.
No.
If you have no idea how long retopology takes, well, you should just do retopology a little bit, because it also means by the time you're done doing retop for the first time, you're going to be twice as fast, and now your initial schedule is just busted. That said, though, always add like a 20% buffer to it, because stuff always takes more time than
usually what I do in production is I almost add twice.
Yeah.
Like if you get asked for something where it's like, okay, we need a displacement map for this thing, and you know it's gonna take a day just with like back and forth. I'm like, it's gonna take me 2 days because I know there's gonna be feedback along the way, or I don't know, the lighting artist can't get my map to work, even though I don't know, it's displacement maps. For some reason that always happens. So just plan ahead. Like, it's not, in a production, you never want to be too fast, even though that sounds kind of weird. Like, obviously, yeah, you want to deliver on time, and it's also good if you can exceed their expectations, but you also don't want to make your life too hard. If they start to get a wind of it, okay, this guy, he's done with a character in half a day, then we'll give him a quarter of a day to finish it, because they kind of constantly want to push the deadlines. So you also have to like kind of be mindful of that.
Yeah, congrats. You just got double the amount of work for the same amount of pay. So
exactly. But then on to, I guess, some more actionable stuff, which is how to actually get started with all this. Like, if you have no idea and you're just starting out and your dream is to become a character artist, like, where should you start? Obviously, we have a lot of training available both on the FlippedNormals marketplace, but I would say at this point, we're up to like 250 some videos on this YouTube channel. There is basically everything you need to know about getting started as a character artist for free on this channel. So, you know, we have playlists for that as well.
Yeah, we have the character artist workshop, whatever it is, which is, it's like 50 videos. And
for feedback related things, we really encourage you to stop by the Discord, and get some feed on the art feedback channel. We're also currently working on mentorships. That's going to be coming out later. We'll talk about that at a later stage. But in terms of what you can do is working on your fundamentals. And people are probably going to get tired at this point. But it's like, keep talking about fundamentals. But if you're just getting started as a character artist, being able to understand anatomy, work with anatomy, doing figure sculpting, doing figure drawing, and understanding color. Those are like some of the most important things as a character artist. It doesn't matter if you're doing 3D or 2D, they both apply. So let's say you're doing 2D. Okay, then you focus a lot on the character figure drawing, where maybe you go to croquis classes or you do online croquis classes, sort of like get a understanding of form and weight and volume. And then in 3D, you can do the same thing. I mean, I would encourage 3D artists to also do figure drawing, because that's helped me quite a lot.
So much.
But then also figure sculpting. And you sort of like transition that, what you have from croquis into 3D, where you do sort of these time-restricted sculpts of weight and form and characters. And then obviously also transition that into faces, and also, like we talked about, color, like master studies. if you're into painting, and in general, if you want to do characters, it's good to have an understanding of how do you compose different parts of a costume together, what actually looks good on a character. So I think those are some really good tips.
I think when it comes to studying that, a good way of doing it is to really put a deadline onto each study as well. I don't mean like a 2-week one, but I put a time limit, because you learn so much in the earliest hours of a sculpt.
Yeah.
So if you know that you have a 2-week sculpt, but the real learning is actually within the first 5 hours, just do a lot of 5-hour sculpts. You can push out 2 a day for 2 weeks. That's a lot of sculpts. So then you maximize in the learning, because at the end of the sculpt, you have to go through it at some point, right? You just have to go through it and finalize it. But the end of the sculpt is almost like labor. It's almost the part where you're just sitting and you're just kind of mindlessly just working the volumes and all that. While it is important, it's way more important in the beginning to make sure you understand proportion, anatomy, general gesture, like you were talking about, like the weight of skin, just generally doing that. Because if you do amazing pores and skin on top of a broken foundation, then you have nothing. You just have a completely broken sculpt.
I mean, this is something that we just talked about with Andrew, like from Blender Guru. Like he was getting into painting and drawing, and sort of figured out that he had more of a passion for doing caricatures. He thought that was a lot more interesting. And I think like you talked about there, it just boils down to the first part of a sculpt or a drawing, a piece, whatever it is. That's the tricky part. That's the brain intense part, where you work things out. Maybe you do a little bit of concepting there and like figure out how do things actually fit together in 3D, or like how does it look like when I transition in 2D. But the end stages, especially for a sculpt, if you're sculpting a face, okay, where you're adding pores, you're adding wrinkles, that's important. But I feel it's not as valuable. Like it's something you can find a scan, and then you can apply pores and wrinkles to that. Okay, now you know how to kind of do it. You do that a few more times, you get a feel for it. But the initial thing of getting your volumes in there and getting the character, getting the expression in there, working all that out, how do things fit on a face, how do you get weighted costumes to sit properly? That's the tricky part.
And that's the kind of stuff which never goes away.
Yeah.
The reason we talk about this as fundamentals is because it is the fundamental of the craft. Because if you were to do this 400 years ago, it's the same thing as it is today.
Yeah.
You could literally translate the old sculpts into modern sculpts, and it would be top rows at Seaburg Central because we're so
week.
good. But the basics there, that's kind of like what tools you're using. You're not using the same tools. Like Bernini, you use very different tools than what we're using now. Same in Seaburg. Like we're still using different tools now. There are new brushes added and Sculptors Pro, all these kind of things. But that doesn't really matter. That just makes your job a bit faster.
Yeah.
You're just going to get to a shitty sculpt really fast right now compared to a shitty sculpt really slowly if you're using clay or stone or something. So, but if you understand the anatomy, weight, all that, then you get to take away the time. At least then you get to a good sculpt eventually.
And
so
then
important.
I guess for like what could you put in a portfolio or in a show reel, right? So we've been talking a little bit about this, and I've also over the years I've been getting a lot of things sent to me where people's like, oh, can you evaluate the portfolio? How about this and what about this? And one guy, I remember he sent me this knight portfolio. We just talked about this before the video. It was a knight portfolio with knights. That's all he had in his portfolio, and they were beautiful. I mean, maybe, I don't know, 10, 20 knights or something. And you could tell that like he was very proficient at doing armor and doing weapons for knights and really getting that feel as a painting portfolio. And he asked me sort of like, so what can I improve and what can I do better? And I was like, something that's not a knight? Show me that you can do not a knight. As soon as I've seen like your first knight, I know that you can do it. So it's about creating variety in your portfolio, not just doing the same thing. So something like a knight is awesome because it combines, there's hard surface, but it's sort of like that organic hard surface.
And function as well.
Yeah.
They're not just made to look cool. They had to keep the person alive. So armor might be the most highly functional piece of geometry or tech ever made.
Yeah, it was pretty badass. And then you have something like, obviously, just a regular human. Like people, doing something. It can be, it can be people doing actions. It can be a static piece. It can be something like a likeness study. Though likeness studies are hard. I don't do likeness studies. I can't do them. They're too hard for me. It's weird though, because I can sculpt a face by just collaging different faces together and creating a face. But I have a really hard time actually nailing likeness, so I just kind of stay away from it. Because it's such a hard skill. If you can do it, by all means, I think you should. But it's a hard one to nail, because even if you're just sculpting generic human or creating generic human, painting generic human, okay, you can get away with a lot of things because it doesn't have to look like a specific person. But if you mess up the proportions or stuff, people will still sort of be aware, okay, something's iffy. Now, if you take that and the added challenge of, I'm doing Brad Pitt or I'm doing Chris Hemsworth or something on top of already generic human, that just makes it even harder. So if you can, go for it, but it's something that is be aware that it's hard.
When it comes to what human study you should do as well, you can kind of do two parts. You can do one which is a pure accuracy, which is just showing the anatomy. It's not an accurate representation of a human, but it's a good representation of human anatomy or knowledge of that. Or you can do just a straight up figure sculpt. And when you're doing that, you should just keep it simple. You don't have to have two Roman gods fighting and you have a third person coming in. You can just have, it's an old man sitting.
Yeah,
that can be, it can really be a beautiful sculpt. It can be a lot of character in it, and it just clearly shows that you know how to do it. Keep it simple but effective.
And then it's also good to be able to show that you can work with other species. Fish, I don't know, probably not that exciting, but
unless it's a shark.
Something quadrupedal maybe is a good bet, where there's a variety of things to choose from there. So definitely something animal-like. It doesn't have to be realistic, it doesn't have to be something that exists in real life. It can be something that you photobash together and figure out something exciting. Or again, find someone else's concept of a creature, something quadrupedal maybe, and then try to work that up.
Yeah, the reason we're not so specific here in saying you should do a tiger is because we don't really care. If you can do a lion, you can do a tiger. If you can do a fish, you can do a shark. You can do all these kind of things. It's just so that you show that you have clear variation in your skills, so that when you're hiring, you can be like, oh, this person can do human, all the knights in the world, and an animal as well. So keep it nice and varied.
And then something that sort of focuses on general clothing is good. Your understanding of clothing and different eras of clothing, what kind of clothing people would wear. If it's, let's say it's 2D, being able to show your mastery of how things sort of drape, the weight of fabric. Whereas in 3D, you might use a specialized software like Marvelous Designer to do that. But in general, just showing that you know how to compose things on a character as well and how to make it look good. I think that's pretty important.
Turns out, if you're doing characters, that characters sometimes wear clothing.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, it's weird with that, right? Because we keep forgetting that real life is a thing, and you're just doing all these insane orcs and all that without realizing that most characters are wearing a lot of clothing all the time.
Yeah.
So that's also not a bad idea to just focus on something like that, because most people aren't. So if you're an expert at Marvelous Designer, that is a real extra star in your book, because now suddenly you can just jump into production. You had that as well for Guardians of the Galaxy, just jumping straight into doing Baby Groot's costume.
Yeah, because
you can do that. It is a lot harder to find somebody who can sculpt and Marvelous Designer than somebody who can just do sculpting.
Yeah, true. It's weird. With Baby Groot, that was I was hired at a frame store. I did some. I think it was just from the get-go, really. They were like, okay, you do Marvelous Design? I was like, yeah, cool. Okay, yeah, we have a Baby Groot's costume for you. I was like, okay, sick.
Just that. Something simple.
Being able to add these things to your arsenal as an artist, I think is good to show. And even more important, I think, it kind of goes away from being a character artist a little bit, but just be aware that being a character artist is a highly specialized position. And most of the time, even though you are a character artist, you're probably still going to have to do props. You're still going to have to do some environment stuff here from time to time. So it's good to be able to show that in your pieces as well. Not necessarily just having a character, but maybe combine it with a prop or something. Create some history in it. Show something that's interesting.
That's why doing something like a knight is such a good idea, because that is essentially just a base mesh with a bunch of props on it.
Yeah.
If you can sculpt a knight, you can make a can of Coke. Like, you're totally fine there.
Yeah.
But I sometimes recommend people, particularly if you're a pure student and you want to become a character artist, then definitely do a environment piece. If you're already working in the field and you want to specialize in the characters, you don't necessarily need that. But if you're aiming at a character position, do some environmental work as well, because then they can put you in the environment department, and then once you're ready, you can jump into the character department. It's such an advantage just getting your foot in the door, because a lot of times they will be like, cool, your characters are awesome, we don't need that right now because that's a more senior position.
Yeah.
But then once you're in the company, they might be like, well, this guy here, he's pretty decent at it. I'll be talking to him. We have like a background character. We could try to give it to him. I've seen this happen a lot of times in production, and it's a really good way to kind of like to segue into
and then you start working your way up. Essentially, it is hard. Like, I've seen people comment on that before when we talk about it, and it's not like, none of the stuff we say here is to like bring people down or like oh, you can't do character art, you can't do concept art. It's just to manage people's expectations. The fact is, being a character artist isn't an entry-level position, like you mentioned. An entry-level position is you do modeling, and it's not modeling for characters. That's something you work your way towards. Now, that being said, of course, there are superstars that can do it. And I see that argument from people as well, where they go like, well, what about someone like Rafael Grossetti? I'm like, yeah, that's one man.
The art director of God of War. Oh yeah, what if you are the art director of God of War?
Yeah, okay, then you're good, but like, and of course there are a lot of really talented artists out there, but it also takes many, many years to get to that point. So it's just about managing your expectations. And like, I don't want to sit here and make videos to sell people dreams that aren't realistic, to be like, you can do whatever you want as long as you put your mind to it.
And you buy FlippedNormals training.
Yeah, no, I think that's bullshit. So it's just about like being able to manage your expectations and figuring out, okay, what is actually realistic and what's the path to choose.
And also find some people who can give you feedback. This is always a tricky one, because now the question is going to be, how do I find people I can trust to give me feedback? And I don't know.
Yeah,
it's one of these. It's the question is, how do you make friends online? I don't know. It's a tricky one.
We get this a lot because we talk about it. So a lot of people contact us, and I get it. From time to time, I do also help out if I can. The reality is just we're super busy. Like running FlippedNormals, running the YouTube channel, creating content. It takes up a lot of time. It's like 2 full-time jobs. So whenever I can fit in feedback sessions, I try. But that's where most of the time I try to refer people to the Discord.
Yeah, a good way as well is if you are kind of getting into the character artist community, even if you're a beginner and the community sees that you're just pumping out sculpt art for sculpt and you're so passionate, then it doesn't really matter that your skill level isn't there yet. What you're seeing is your trajectory is from somebody who is at a low level, but you're going towards a higher level, because with this behavior you have to become good. Yeah. Like you're doing 3 studies a day and you're doing it for a year, you will just get better. And then people are very much willing to give you a hand here and there. And sometimes the feedback doesn't have to be sculpt this wrinkle at this spot. It could literally be a thing as, should I do this project or this project? What do you think would look better at it? And it can be a decision which they just write you one single word, and that can be enough to just give you some general direction.
Yeah.
Just, it can be a concept, or it can be read this book. That's something I've been doing a lot as well. It's when giving people feedback, it's not so much the specificity of the piece, but is more, you got to think about this in a slightly different way and use this way of thinking on all the other pieces.
So like I have some advice for people reaching out, let's say hypothetically to us for feedback, right? If you were to reach out to us, like, don't take it personally if we don't get back to the feedback. We just get it a lot. But if we do, something that you can do to make it easier on everyone is don't write a novel. Just be like, I saw your stuff. Can I get some feedback? Here's my pieces. Line them up perfectly. Just some links or something, so it's really easy to get to. That makes it a lot easier, not just for us, for all the people to get you feedback as well. It's kind of like when you're applying for studio, like we talked about. You want to make it as easy for people as possible. So a lot of people who work in the industry are really busy, and it's not because they don't want to give your feedback. It's just you can't always prioritize it. But if you try to make it as easy for them as possible, I think you're going to have a lot more success with getting feedback.
And a small little thing as well, if you are a student and you're searching feedback, please, for the love of God, don't say that this is a school project. I see this a lot where you have teachers saying that the assignment now is to reach out to some professionals and get their opinion or something. And when I get those, it's very disheartening in a way, because the kid, oftentimes they don't care about the subject, they just want a good grade on whatever it is. You should really say that I'm interested in becoming a character artist in games, and then how can I get there? Do you have any notes whatsoever? Because don't even mention the school, whatever, because then it just seems it doesn't seem that you care as much as if you say, this is my clear goal, what can you help me with?
Yeah. And another thing, just a quick mention for the Discord, I think is cool that, like, over the years, like, I think we've built a really cool community on the Discord server, and so a lot of people come there, and a lot of people come, they become like regulars there, and we have people there that they're both professionals, they're students, and there are people that are starting to get hired as well. So being part of a community like that, we start to know people. It's also good. Like, you can talk, you can get advice. It's just, I think it's a really good place to engage with people who are very, like-minded.
Yeah, we'll throw a link in the description for Discord.
But yeah, I think that just about wraps up how to make a good character artist portfolio, I hope. If you want to hear more about this topic, or if there are any more sort of like specifics about character artists or portfolios in general that you want us to talk about, just drop a comment down below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.
Thanks a lot, guys.
If you're looking for training or high quality assets, make sure to stop by the FlippedNormals marketplace, and if you're interested in supporting us by buying our merchandise, you can check that out in the description below.